Okay, give us a sense of what's behind that thinking, first of all.
So you see, if you look at the world today, there are four big trends that are underway, and most of them, actually, all of them are highly disruptive and are causing a lot of pain for several countries. These are demographics, so the world is aging, deglobalization, decarbonization, which is disrupting a lot of fossil capacities and leading to higher costs, and digitalization, which is also disrupting a lot of businesses. Now, if you look at India, it's probably the only country in the world that's benefiting from all of these four trends. And in large part, this is to do with a lot of heavy lifting that has happened in India over the past 5-7 years. So it was a bit painful when all these things were happening towards the second half and in the second half of the previous decade. But now we are come to the point where I think India will start bearing fruit of all that policy work that has taken place. So we see India gaining share in global exports as a consequence of it becoming the office to the world and factory to the world. We see India's energy transition actually driving growth. This is, twofold thing. India is increasing energy consumption because of a lot of investments made in the energy sector, and people now have access to electricity, for example, and also because India is making big investments in renewables. And unlike the rest of the world, its fossil capacity is not going to get disrupted because energy consumption is rising. And lastly, the investments in digitalization, which is, India stack, very unique to India, which is, another big driver of growth. So a lot of idiosyncratic stuff happening in India, which is why we are so optimistic about how India will shape up in the coming decade.
Ridham, I just to pick up on one of those 4 points that you made, and that is demographics. That may well be actually the key to everything. What's your take?
Yeah, well, it is the key, but demographics can work both ways. It can be a sword and it can be a dividend, and it all depends on how policy and how you set up the economy to gain from it or lose from it. I mean, if you have too many young people and they're jobless, well, it can be a big disaster. And there are a lot of countries around, say in Africa, which have a lot of young people, but they don't have the same growth potential because they haven't done that much work on policy. I think India is standing to gain from demographics because of all the work that is happening in India. So it works both ways.
Ridham, also in demographics, though, you have the confluence of the very, very rich and the very poor. The very rich is obviously going to drive to this third biggest economy that you're pointing towards. But what about the very poor? What sort of momentum do we see in terms of more equitable living standards over the next few years for Indians?
I think that's a very good question, because one of the things that we're seeing in this report about the new India is that the income pyramid in India is almost flipping in the next 10 years. So right now, you're absolutely right. The people at the bottom of the pyramid, it's a very thick layer. Lots of poor people in India, lots of people earning less than $1,000 a year, less than $3 a day. They are very poor people. But there are two things that are underway here. Firstly, because of India's stack, India has been able to make social distribution very viable and extremely efficient. So the government is able to deposit social benefits directly to the intended beneficiary, very much unlike the past when India did not have these channels and it used these large ledgers, physical signatures, a lot of middlemen involved, a lot of corruption and a lot of leakages. The second is that the transition in the growth rate automatically lifts the bottom layer. It's like when the tide rises, the smallest boats rise the most. And that's what's happening to poorer people. They will experience this change in life and change in income. So one of the forecasts that we're making in the report is India's per capita income, which, by the way, has gone from around $1,400 to around $2,200 over the last 8 years, is likely to go to $5,000 over the next 10 years. And that is really what will drive the lift to the poorest people. And at the top end, big change happening. We're seeing, rich households quintuple from 5 million to 25 million. So India will be probably the market that luxury good companies, for example, will want to target over the next few years.
Ridham, let's talk a little bit more about the here and now, though, when we know that has been such an incredible year for Indian equities. What happens, though, in terms of higher rates affecting valuations? Do you see any kind of stumbles in the short term?
Actually, I think most of the work on the rate side is done because I think inflation in India peaked way back in April and higher rates kick in with a bit of a lag. So we're at 5.9% policy rate. Our exit rate forecast is 6.5%. So we may have a couple of more hikes to go before the RBI actually stops. And we think inflation will easily roll over in 2023. There are risks to that view. We don't know what will happen on the war and what that may mean for commodity prices, especially things like fertilizer prices going into 2023. So we keep an eye on that. But on the flip side, there's also a slowing world, which may cause demand to slow down, and therefore prices may not go up. But that's the imponderable that's really outside India's control. But on the rate side, I think much of the heavy lifting is done. It's caused valuations to go down. I mean, the fact is that the world has been in a pretty big bear market this year. Most indices are down between 20 and 40%. The Nifty is largely flat. So it's outperformed massively. But the P ratio has declined because earnings have been rising, and that's reflecting the higher short rates that we have in India.
Ridham, I mean, when we look at, let's say, a company like Infosys, its share price down 20% since the start of the year. Is this whole idea of that digitization and unique digitization that you mentioned not really being, at the moment, priced into what's going on with these IT outsourcing companies? And, where do you actually benefit in the market from what your thesis is all about?
Yeah, so on the IT services companies, there are two things here. Firstly, is at the start of the year, they were really rich in terms of valuations. So a lot of the growth that was coming in was priced. And then, of course, US growth started slowing down, and there's a prospect of a US recession, which historically has meant a slowdown in IT services revenues because US companies tend to cut back on capex, likewise Europe. So there's expectation now that's baked in that there will be a slowdown in revenue growth. So at these levels, I think a lot of those bad news that are coming in the next 12 months seem to be priced in. That's the near term. Over the longer run, I think IT services companies are extremely well placed because if you're trying to digitalize your business, the cheapest place that you can do it is India. And India is really good at doing it, as the last 5 years have shown. So I think these companies are going to get more and more business as time progresses after this cycle, is downturn is over.